Well, hello to you all again in podcast land. Welcome to another episode of Harbor Rock Wealth Management's podcast series, Life, Health, and Wealth, where we are discussing financially driven topics and how they relate to our financial lifestyle, topics that we actually want to hear about, hopefully. I'm Jimmy Lester. I'm here with Ruben Smith, my partner.
Welcome.
And before I introduce our first guest, now this is our first guest ever. The first time it was just me and Ruben. Now you get a guest, which I'm sure is going to add quite an interest to the show. I usually offer a sports stat of the day, and I'm going to jump right in about this guest. This guest in 8th grade, and I was his teammate, scored 17 points in his final game in 8th grade, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks. I embellished the last 3, but he did have the 17 points. This is also the president of San Juan Capistrano Rotary, and it was also the king in the court at Mission School in 8th grade, 1992. I'd like to welcome Carlos Aguilar of 3G Insurance Services out of San Juan Capistrano.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Happy you're here, man.
Thanks for being here. Today our topic is health insurance. That may paralyze people right out of the gate. Personally, I know that it can be very confusing, very overwhelming. I know that I have an HMO. I don't even know much about it. I don't know a lot of the differences. So Carlos is here today to add some color and a little insight to some of the things that are important about health insurance.
Absolutely.
Another stat of the day that I want to give you, I heard this stat the other day, 30 million. And you'll never believe this. I was just floored when I heard this. Roughly 10% of the U.S. population, 30 million people, are uninsured. So this is 30 million folks without health insurance. So why are these people uninsured? What could have happened? Carlos, can you elaborate and provide some color on
Sure.
that number?
Absolutely. So a lot of the times it's just folks who don't know, right? So that's where we have to educate them and explain to them, well, first of all, why they want insurance. A lot of folks will just say, well, I don't need it. I'm not out there doing anything crazy. I don't do extreme sports. So why
I don't get sick.
Yeah, I don't get sick. I'm super healthy. But, you're driving down the road and somebody swerves over to you and hits you. What are you going to do? You have to go to the hospital. And now you're going to have a medical bill.
Yeah, you're going no matter what.
You're going, right? So, tragic accident, 911 is called, you get picked up, you get taken to the hospital, you're going to have some bills. And if you don't have health insurance, that could be a really large bill. So once you start educating people and telling them the scenarios that could happen in their lives, which they don't expect, then they say, I should probably have this. Especially if you have a family. But I think we were talking about this earlier, and a lot of the times, why would someone not have health insurance when they even know these things? It's cost, right?
Yeah.
So they say, well, I just can't afford $1,500 a month. But if we were to go online and look at the Affordable Care Act, so Covered California, if they're making a certain amount of money, we could probably find them a plan where they're going to get subsidized half of their premium.
Yeah.
So now they're going to say, well, $1,500 a month isn't so bad if I'm only paying $750, right?
Yeah.
So again, it just goes back to educating. It goes back to showing them what it looks like with and without insurance, what the true cost is. And once they see those, usually people will get it. And to be honest, that 30 million, a lot of the times that includes also the homeless population, right?
Oh, I got you.
So
Yep.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
the homeless population, unfortunately, they're not getting the attention they need. Nobody's advocating for them. So there's agents that actually will exclusively work in soup kitchens, believe it or not. And they'll help people who are, unhoused and try to get them into something because, you know what, they need coverage too.
Right.
Do you run into this with your own clients quite a bit? Or in what position are people when they're sitting with you? If you could walk us through
Sure.
maybe what an experience looks like with you. Are these people uninsured? Are they switching jobs, or
Sure.
what's going on?
So usually when I sit with somebody, they're either leaving their employer and they need individual health insurance, or they are already insured, but they're looking to see what other options they have.
Okay.
So maybe to your point, you said you have an HMO. They might want to try a PPO now, right?
Let's dive into that. Let's before we get into the guts of this, can you tell us what the difference is between an HMO and a PPO?
Of course. So in the simplest form, an HMO, I'd like to consider it like home. There's the letters HMO, HOME, home. It's very homey. It's inclusive. It's closed. There's a network. So typically on an HMO, you'll have a primary care doctor, and they refer you to specialists.
Got it.
HMO versus PPO, there isn't a good or bad per se. It's what you're comfortable with. So let's just say, for instance, my client knows that they have surgeries coming up. They have extra care they need. They may want to go with a PPO if they want options. So again, remember the HMO, you have a primary care doctor that refers you to specialists. With a PPO, you can go to any doctor that accepts the plan, and then there's in-network or out-of-network costs.
I remember seeing that in mine and looking at the differences. It's crazy.
Right. So, well, and not only that, so the premiums, of course, are going to be different. So let's say for a family of four, you're paying $1,200 for an HMO. You could be paying $2,000 for the PPO. But, so personally, well, right now I have a PPO. My family and I, we have a PPO. But my wife and I are considering changing to an HMO in the fall. I don't know that I want to do that. It's like, yes, I will save money, but if I need to go to a doctor, I need to go to my primary and be referred to the specialist. Right now, I can pick up the phone and call a specialist, and as long as they take my insurance, I can go.
That could really delay you. I mean, you really have to know your own needs, right?
Right.
I mean, that could really delay the process. Like, personally, my wife, we were on a PPO for quite some time, and she utilizes a couple different doctors. Recently, starting a business, I was in a different boat. I had to go out and get my own insurance, and we were separate for the first time on insurance. And at the beginning of the year, I jumped onto hers. It was a cost saver for us. I don't need a lot of medical attention at this time in my life, thankfully, and it's for catastrophic coverage. So, for her, she has some ongoing needs that she needs to address. Well, now we're on this HMO, and recently we had to get a referral from her primary now. And even though she saw that other doctor, this specialist, 5 or 6 times already, and we already had a relationship, we had to back off, slow it down. And we knew this, but you really don't realize the impact of it until you're in the middle of the situation. So I guess that goes back to the education piece of really understanding, listening to your client's needs. Absolutely. And making those recommendations based on things they might not be considering.
No, for sure. So, and that's what I try to tell people. It's like, there is no good or bad. It's different, right? The approach to your health is going to be different on one plan over the other. And it's just, where are you? And you said it. You had one plan, she had another.
Right.
So you don't always have to be on the same plan.
Really?
No. And especially when it comes to Medicare, even more so. I mean, they're literally 2 individual plans. So there isn't really a family plan when it comes to Medicare. So I will take every single person in that family separately and say, what are your needs? Where do you want to go? How do you want to do it? And then decide based on that. So,
got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Speaking of Medicare, that can open up a whole. I think we can have a whole nother podcast just on
yes.
Medicare. So maybe we'll invite you back in
for sure
for another session.
That'd be great.
I'm sure. So in your name, 3G Insurance Services, I'm sure this wasn't some name you came up with and thought of. Then you had to think of, well, what does G stand for?
Well, was it before 4G and 5G? So now you're a little. Are you dated?
You're still 3G?
You're right. I'm dated. So that was about 87 when 3G came out.
So I happen to know, genuine, generous, and grateful. So as long as I've known you, and again, when I kicked this off, I alluded to the fact that we went to grade school together, and for
a long time ago.
I've not. But those 3 things, I know that to be of your personal character, for sure. How do those things translate into your approach, into your business?
Sure. I think I was telling you both earlier that one of my clients said, it's that servant's heart with a shepherd's touch. And I thought, wow, I mean, that just seems like such a lofty place to be, so high.
That's
so
a high mark to achieve there.
It is.
Yeah.
So I will not say that that's exactly who I am, but at least it's something I strive to be. I want to be that way. And when I thought of the name, I was like, okay, so I want to be genuine with my clients, always transparent. I mean, they should know everything. They should know everything about me. They should know everything about the insurance. They should know everything about healthcare in general. And then, the generosity, the generous with my time, right?
Sure.
I think we were saying how, your clients will call you at different hours of the day. It's like, I try to answer when I can. And if I don't answer, I try to call them back within a reasonable time.
Right.
So, I mean, I want to be generous with my time. I want to be generous with my clients. And then the gratitude is just grateful to be in the position I'm in.
Sure.
I get to take care of others, and what I get compensated takes care of my family.
Right.
So it's just, again, I mean, I'm super grateful to be in the position I'm in, and that kind of leads into the other things as well. I mean, it's easy to be generous and it's easy to be genuine when you are being taken care of and your family is.
Well, so we liken that to being an advocate. So, a financial advisor, wealth management. There's a lot to that. I think as we've developed Harbor Rock Wealth Management, it's really allowed us to bring on that advocacy piece for our clients. So, as some of you out there may or may not know, Carlos is part of our trusted contact list. So, and in large part, not just because we need to fill a spot for clients that need a health insurance consultant, but it's based off of how you run your business, and from what you've shared and what we've experienced with feedback from other clients, it's certainly advocacy driven. So what does advocacy mean for you specifically?
Well, I think it's always, advocating for that client. Like you said, it's being that lifelong advocate person who gets to be, I guess, hand-holding them by their side. I deal with folks who are older, they don't have a lot of family, and many times they don't know what to do.
They're
Right?
overwhelmed, right? They can paralyze them.
Right. So just the other day, I had a client who, her neighbor believes she had a stroke, and she has no family. Well, she has a daughter, but she lives far away.
Okay.
And that's what happens. A lot of the times as we age, people move away. And, I picked her up. We went to the urgent care. I made sure that she was getting the
Wow.
care she needed. And,
Wow.
I mean, is it going above and beyond? I don't know. I mean, I would hope that if my mom was in the same situation, right, somebody would step up and take care of her, help her to some degree. So,
Well, and you have relationships. You don't just work directly with individuals or families, the covered. You have relationships, from what I understand, with the insurance companies.
yes.
I mean, you understand the back end of it on how that works. That probably, I can imagine that gives you a leg up on making some recommendations and stepping in as that true advocate for your client.
Sure. So, I mean, well said. And I go out and I build relationships. I think that's what we were talking about. One of the pieces of what we do is we build relationships, and I feel like I'm very good at going out, meeting folks at the insurance carriers as well as the medical groups. So, with those relationships, we're able to help the client even more. So, one particular example. There was a client who had a specific insurance. They weren't getting what they needed. They kept calling customer service, and they weren't getting anywhere. So I called the medical group. I explained the situation, and I said, look, this gentleman has an issue with their heart, and they need to see somebody with this specific surgery. So the person at the medical group and I researched, found the doctor. They happened to be in San Clemente. The client was in Laguna Niguel. Within 2.5 weeks, they were in having surgery, and they got the situation taken care of.
Unreal.
Had they just gone through customer service, I mean, no offense to customer service, but
Right.
there isn't the same type of, I guess, research going on. I mean, we were literally deep diving in. We were calling the doctors. We were seeing who was available next versus just randomly picking a doctor and waiting 6 months. We called them. This guy had an opening in 2.5 weeks. We switched the doctor, and then the person got the care they needed.
Ruben, I know in our line of work, we run across this topic of do-it-yourselfer quite a bit. There's a lot of platforms out there that people are using successfully in certain situations, but I think a lot of people end up thinking that they can just do it all themselves, save money. There's a lot of different reasons. And especially in a time of market volatility, and there's a lot of noise out there, their response to that might be, there's a lot of information out there, and I can do all my research, and that's great. But you know what's also bad about that? There's a lot of information out there, and it can be overwhelming. It can be confusing. And I mean, we're talking about your financial future here.
Right.
I mean, we're, in that sense of where do we think it's better to have an advisor? What's the benefit versus going the DIY route?
Well, I think we can just nail down on this advocacy thing, right? That's the easy answer since we've already been talking about it. But the reality is, and full transparency here, is if I was out of this business tomorrow, I would be a DIYer, right? Because I I'm confident in my skill set and I trust that I know what I'm doing.
Sure.
The problem is there's a lot of noise out there with, and it's been out there for a long time, maybe the last 10, 15 years. We had the no load funds, we had the larger, online broker dealers, discount trades, that all, and rightfully so. In my opinion, the business was significantly overpriced, in my opinion, where what's transpired as a result is the lack of personalized service, advice, and advocacy. So, there's I think there's a great platform for whether it's a website like Covered California for people that understand it and know exactly what they want and how to navigate the system to go out and do it on their own.
Sure.
But there's always, in my opinion, going to be a place for someone that needs a little bit of hand holding, or we like to say we're clients' CFOs, right? We're their financial sounding board when life happens, for them to bounce ideas off of and make sure they're making the most prudent decision for them.
Sure.
So, one component, Carlos, of what we do, or I guess if you really strip it back to what we do, is we are in sales, right? Sales.
There is some sort of sales aspect or transaction at some
Absolutely.
point, right?
That's how we're compensated, right? Because we have provided you a certain product, whether it's investments, insurance, but with that comes a stigma. So I'll share with you my stigma, or an early stigma that I was presented with. So I used to work with a company back in the day that managed 401k plans, 403b plans, so employer-sponsored retirement plans. And I was working with a hospital, and what we would do is on a weekly basis, we would set up in the cafeteria and literally have a tablecloth, have a little sign. I was the guy in the cafeteria, and I'd be there from 11 to 2, Well, it's not just employees in the cafeteria, there's also guests. So I remember one time very vividly, this old guy comes up and looks at me. I could tell he was a guest. He certainly was not an employee. He said, "So what you selling?" It's like, well, what do you mean? And me being in my 20s and a little bit more of a smart aleck.
As you say in your
Can you
suit that doesn't fit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a whole other story. But can you see the sign here? It says Eisenhower, but it says 403b plan. I'm providing a retirement plan for the employees. But it caught me off guard because I even very early on in this career, I never thought of myself as a salesman. I thought of myself. I don't know if I was quite at the shepherd level, but I was an advisor. I was there to help, and as a result of my efforts, guess what? A product was provided, and yes, I technically sold something, and I was a salesman. So, have you come across that as far as an insurance salesman, and how do you think you overcome that, or maybe you had to earlier in your career?
Sure. So, there are different levels of insurance. Whether it be bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. The sell is where you might actually sell somebody on a higher level plan. I would never, ever, ever do that, ever. So we keep talking about education. So I'm educating folks on their options, and I encourage them to select what they think is best for them. It does not benefit you any way to try to sell somebody on a higher level plan, ever, because they will know. They will know at some point that they were sold on something that they did not need. So, Jim, earlier you said, I'm healthy, I don't need it. Right, but if you get in an accident, you're going to need something. So if somebody came to me and said that, well, I don't need insurance, I never get sick, all these different things, then maybe you need a lower level plan. So call it a bronze plan with, whatever the benefits may be. But if I know that you have some sort of illness that needs treatment on a regular basis, or, you have a couple surgeries coming up in the new year, I would be putting them in a bad situation by selling them the lowest level bronze plan, knowing what the cost would be. Where I can educate them on these surgeries cost X amount of dollars. If you were on a gold plan, it's going to cost you this much. So now they're going to say, okay, I understand why. I'm not selling them. I'm educating them on why they should get the gold plan.
You're almost empowering them to make the right decision.
Always.
Right?
Always.
You're arming them with the right information.
at the end of the day, it's my client's decision on what plan they get.
Right.
I never encourage, well, this is the one you should get, unless someone just doesn't quite understand and they say, look, I'm just going to trust whatever you say.
Right.
And I'm sure they do that to you guys as well. They'll say, look, I don't get this. I don't want to know. Just pick what I need to do. And
Well, just because people don't know doesn't mean they're stupid.
no,
Or they're not
at
going
all.
to figure it out. I mean, we all deal with very intelligent people. They just don't know what we know.
Well, you just said, how often
It's-
do we get people that come in and go, well, I have a master's in this, I have a PhD in that,
Totally.
but I don't understand anything to do with this.
That's right.
Exactly. And,
And-
and sorry to cut you off, but that's a very similar approach to us. We when it comes to recommendations, we give them our unbiased opinions based off of, let's say, for instance, how their portfolio should be allocated. And we always focus on making sure they're going to be or we feel they're going to be adequately compensated for the risks they're taking on. But that's not just. It's not a cookie cutter portfolio for all. We've done our due diligence. We've built the financial plan, so we've gotten to know where they're at. So
Sure.
at the end of the day, if that portfolio from a risk standpoint doesn't allow them to sleep at night, then they're going to have the end. It's their decision. But it's
Absolutely.
also our job as their advocates to come in and say, okay, you can go this route. These are the pros and cons, and this is what you're up against. Just know, and perhaps in your business, it would be if health starts taking a turn for the worse, in our annual review or as we meet, I don't be surprised if this comes up again as a
Oh,
recommendation.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and then you also said something earlier that I want to kind of go back to. You said, if I were to leave this industry tomorrow, I could be a DIYer and do it myself,
Sure.
right? But you're licensed. You have years of knowledge.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I'm licensed. I have years of knowledge. I can go out and pick my own insurance.
Right.
How many people do we run into that have the level of licenses and knowledge that we do? It doesn't happen often. So, I mean, kind of going back to the point of insurance salesman or a salesman, we're not salesmen per se. I personally think we're educators, and we're educating them on that knowledge that we have. So, yes, I can go be a DIYer tomorrow, but most people can't.
Mm-hmm.
We're deciphering all that noise. You said there's a lot of noise out there. So we are the ones that decipher the noise and get it down to a funnel approach to where they can then take that information. In a sense, we're kind of making them a DIYer, but with an advocacy behind it, right?
So let's talk about the your client experience. So we have this insuranceman stigma or salesman stigma. What is it like for someone to work with you?
So I think that they're always getting someone who is looking out for their best interest,
Okay.
whatever that may be. You're going to get someone who is following up. People are always grateful when you follow up. If you say you're going to call them, you're going to call them. You're going to take that extra step. You're going to call the medical groups. You're going to call the doctors. You're kind of like family, right? So when you bring in somebody to your business, I mean, that's another family member. So like I said earlier, it's like I want to take care of my clients as if they were my mom or dad.
Sure.
My mom and dad are my clients. They're my Medicare clients. I've had them on my book of business since I started the business. They're one of my first clients. And you know how parents are. They call you all the time for, hey, can you call the insurance and ask them about the glasses? Or can you call this? And sure, absolutely. And if my clients were to do the same, I'd do the same just like my parents do. They call me for random little things instead of calling customer service because that's what I do.
Yep.
Perfect. So what is your cost? How do you get compensated? In our line of work, it's very clear. There's
Sure.
typically a management fee for the client's portfolio. And for that, they get full access to us year-round, financial planning, the advocacy piece. So it's very clear-cut and defined prior to us engaging or finalizing any relationship. So how are you compensated?
So we get paid by the insurance carriers. And what I do, so let me backtrack. If someone were to get insurance on their own without my services, what they pay is going to be the same amount of what they pay if they work with me. So
Really?
Right.
So it's already built into
it's built into the
prices.
cost. So
Wow.
whether you are going to work with an agent or not, the cost is the same.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
So if anything, people always think that you're going to have to pay more if you work with a broker, but you're probably going to end up paying more if you don't.
Why is that?
Right? So they might put themselves on a plan that doesn't make sense for their family. And then all of a sudden something happens and all these costs start coming up.
Yep.
Had we sat down and evaluated their needs, we could have reduced that cost based on what we know.
So talking about costs, is there a penalty for not being insured? I've heard a rumor about it. I've never looked into it. I've always been insured, but I heard at one point that there is a penalty for not being insured.
There is. So it's actually $850 per adult. So if you're a family of 4, it's $850 for you, your spouse or partner, and then the kids are $425 a piece. So I think it adds up to like $2,650 or almost $2,700 that you will pay in penalty for not having health insurance.
So again,
I have no clue.
where money might be tight for some of these people, they're saying, wait a minute, you're going to penalize me. I don't, it's hard for me. More importantly, to have someone like you, looking out for their best needs to make sure that they're not getting overcovered, really stretching themselves to a point where they're damaging themselves financially. We often, going back to relationships, those are the lifelong relationships we're building. We talk about stocks and bonds. That drives what we do. It's a tool to get people to where we can solve for whatever it is. Same thing for you. You're in the relationship business talking about healthcare, and you happen to be talking about prescriptions and doctors. But that really slides back into being that advocate for our clients.
For sure. No, absolutely.
So simply put, it doesn't cost them any more.
No.
Okay, than if they were to go online. And I recently, when we transferred over or opened up Harbor Rock Wealth Management, I did the same Google searches and found probably the same websites that everyone else found.
And how many calls did you get from random people? And
so you talk about the mailings, and we have a lot of clients that are of Medicare age, let's call it, and they are bombarded constantly with mailings and solicitations, and honestly, it's debilitating, right? It's frustrating, and so perhaps that also ties into the stigma of, oh, we know a guy, or you should probably get introduced.
Well, Joe Namath is on TV all fall, right, talking about Medicare.
But why would I go to an insurance agent? It's going to cost me more. I'll just do it myself. Well, they're probably doing themselves a disservice by what it sounds like.
Right.
Absolutely.
Carlos, do you ever find yourself stepping into more of an advisory role in the sense of how to avoid these maybe some of these things that end up costing a lot for someone relating to healthcare? And what I mean there is, like, you hear, well, the best way to keep your health costs down, your healthcare costs, are to do the maintenance, the pre-work, in the sense of diet, exercise, de-stressing, getting your sleep, some of the controllables, right? There's some people out there that, unfortunately, they're not as mobile, or they have chronic illnesses. And of course, there's medications that give them a better quality of life and things that they can't avoid, but a lot for the majority of us, I think there's things that we can tweak in our daily life to avoid being on medications, and that will help the cost, or getting surgeries in the future that may end up being unnecessary.
Sure.
Do you find yourself having those conversations with your clients?
All the time. So, you've got people who say, I have a hard time getting around. I feel, this is happening with the bones, or
I'm not sleeping well.
Yeah, all that stuff. And then you start getting to the bottom of it, and they say, well, I have 3 drinks a night. It's like, well, those 3 drinks maybe caused you not to sleep at night, right? The sugars are breaking down, and this is happening. You're getting inflammation. Yeah. I mean, inflammation is one of the biggest problems out there. So
that's what I'm hearing.
You've got, the gut and brain health. I mean, there's a lot to be said with that. So if people are eating better, if they're exercising, I mean, I'll be honest with you guys right now. If I don't exercise, I'm a monster. I mean, my wife's like, you know what? You need to go work out.
Well, you know what's crazy about that too?
You're way nicer when you're working out.
A lot of these people, I mean, again, we're dealing with a lot of educated folks out there. They know their bodies. They know when something's off. And they also, if he's like the guy with the 3 drinks, you might say, hey, that might be interrupting your sleep. He probably knows that.
For sure.
But guess what? That's just like your loved one or someone has been telling you something for years, and then someone else, the expert, tells you, and you're like, well, that's a good point. Maybe I should try that.
Totally. Yeah. And I personally, I'm guilty of the inflammation. I spent, was it March or February? I was out of the office for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And a little scary.
Sure.
But when it all boiled down to it, after a few ER visits and spinal taps and all sorts of stuff, inflammation.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, it's...
Seems like we're learning more and more about how diet and things like it,
Yeah.
if you think about it, we are putting these things in our body.
Right.
Of course. Don't you want to put the best? It's not that easy. You try to find that happy
Yeah,
medium
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
of being crazy conservative with your lifestyle versus just, week long in Vegas at the top of the Bellagio, just
No,
throwing
man.
caution to the wind. I mean,
We're not 20 anymore.
it's
though.
hard. You want to have some fun, but I bet you coming from you having that advice for your clients probably resonates pretty loudly.
I mean, I think it does. And then, one of the other things, we're all sports guys, right? And I mean, how much money do athletes put into their body?
Oh, they're machines. Yeah.
I mean, it's like LeBron James. Didn't he say something like $1 million a year he spends on health and wellness? It's not going to the doctor. It's not having surgeries. Yes, that's part of it, but he's on the front end. He's protecting himself from ever needing
Preventative,
those things.
right.
Well, it's like
Yeah.
maintenance on a car, right? You do the simple things, and your car will probably last you and treat you well, last you a long time.
Sure.
Change the fluids, change the tires,
Right.
rotate the tires. Give her a wash.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
No, for sure. So,
Yeah.
I mean, your question was, do I try to advocate for that? And absolutely, it's get out there and walk,
Sure.
get out there and exercise. I don't know if you knew, but I mean, I was a personal trainer before I got into.
I did
wow.
know that. Yeah, that's
so
right.
in my college years, I worked at 24-hour fitness,
That's right.
and I try to infuse that when I talk to people, and I've actually considered going back and getting my license again, just so I can see what's
That's
new.
not a bad idea.
Right?
Yeah.
What's new? What's new with personal training? What's new with senior fitness?
Sure.
Right? So that I can help my clients. I've even considered going back and doing some sort of group lessons.
No, that's awesome.
Going out
Yeah.
to the park and again, just another added value to my clients.
Yeah.
So,
Well, hey, we're finding ourselves on the 18th green of the show.
all right.
We're lining up for our putt. Briefly,
I remember being on an 18th green with you in Palm Springs one time.
well, and I also remember walking the San Juan golf course with you when we were in 8th grade, going back to 8th grade, with the
And then
pull
end-
cart.
And then end up at Sizzler for some cheesy bread.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
The cheese
before,
toast?
before the best.
Oh, cheese toast was amazing.
But as we're kind of wrapping it up here, can you just maybe add a little color on the future of healthcare?
Sure.
And maybe some of the trends that we're looking at and some of the stuff that we can expect in the future.
Well, I think we kind of alluded to that already when we were talking about health and wellness and just lifestyle. What I really do like about where health is going, health insurance, is acupuncture, chiropractic, mental health, just the preventative stuff that is going into health insurance. They're encouraging folks to get a Fitbit, to get prizes, to get money by hitting certain metrics. So insurance companies understand that if they keep their clients healthy, they're going to be paying out less, and people will live longer and be healthier. You need a healthy population. I mean, we can't all be out there sick. So I really do like that health insurance companies are taking a really strong look at that and saying we need to keep our people healthy.
Right.
And obviously, COVID was a bit of a challenge for all of us, as we know, and the medical field has taken a hit. People are just not. I mean, people are leaving the field altogether.
But didn't COVID bring about some good things like telehealth
For
and
sure.
alternative ways
sure.
to see a doctor and see
Sure.
a doctor
Absolutely.
in a
Good
timely
point.
way?
Absolutely,
I've used it.
Good point.
Yeah.
I have too.
Absolutely. I think it's a great way. So, I mean, the technology. So, I mean, the technology is there and it's improving. We were talking about how, you can get scans of your body in such a quicker way
Crazy.
than it's ever been. You don't have to go get an MRI and sit in a tube for an hour. You can literally walk into
Sure.
a machine that will turn around and scan you kind of like at the airport.
Have you had an MRI?
Yeah,
I
I've
have
had
not.
many
I
recently.
have
Yes.
one.
And how long
And,
were you in there?
30 minutes or so at least, and it's a little nervy.
Sure.
And I'm a little claustrophobic. I think a lot of people are at least a little claustrophobic. I was having an MRI on my knee, and
Whole body's in there?
it went up to my chest, and it was it's loud, and I had headphones on, and it was still loud, and some of these things are pretty.
Imagine the special needs kid in there. I mean,
No, I know.
seriously.
it would never happen.
Yeah.
So my son, whenever he has any procedure, we basically have to put him under
Right.
because he
Right.
can't
Yeah.
handle that. So
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly. We've had we won't go into it now, but yeah, our kids have all had MRIs,
Wow.
or two of them have had MRIs, and at that point,
Challenging.
they need to stay still. So you have to put them under. And the MRIs that I had were the inflammation was in my head, so I
Unreal.
I was right there.
Oh,
you
no.
know,
What am I complaining about? Yeah.
we have 45 minutes or so, just ding, ding, ding,
I would
and
have
all
had
the
to-
noises going back.
I'd have
and
to be
forth.
sedated
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, this has been a great show. Carlos, thanks for being
Yeah,
a
we appreciate
wonderful
it.
Thanks for
first
having me, guys.
a first guest. We can only have the first one time. I'm glad it was
Thank
you.
Thank you.
And just a little tease. Later in the year, we kind of spoke in the beginning of the show. We're definitely going to have you back on to talk about Medicare.
Would love to.
And that's something that, I mean, I know you're also an expert in and an advocate for clients. And there's a lot to talk about Medicare. And I'm sure you'll provide some great color and insights on that. And to all the listeners out there, thanks again for being part of our digital barbershop. And we look forward to next show. Thank you.